How's it going, everyone? Recently there was a list that went viral, a list of 44 rules for Dungeons and Dragons. It appears this was made by a DM for their group, and it started an online discussion all over the world over what exactly should the take on these rules be. Now I'm going to give my take on this, not just from the perspective of someone who DMs, but from the perspective of game design. And I do think that a DM is a game designer. The rules of Dungeons and Dragons are guidelines for the DM to design a game for their players. So let's get straight into it. I'm timing rules. I don't give an F if it's unfair in your opinion because your spells are hard or you don't know what square to move on. You get 1 minute to know all your actions you want to take or skip a turn. Okay, so the issue here is people taking too long to take their turn. Personally, I don't like the idea of timing turns. Sometimes during one player's turn, all the players are discussing what's the best move for them to make, and that's fun and it's part of the game, and let them do that. That said, I understand the dynamic. It's your turn, you're in a battle, you don't have forever to decide what you're going to do, so you better hurry up and think. If you run out of time, I don't think it should be skip a turn. I think it should be something like make a basic attack if you are using a timer. Personally, I don't like the idea of using a timer. That said, players don't want to take too long on their turn. You don't want a situation where a player just didn't do their homework. They don't know what their spells or abilities do. When it was someone else's turn, they weren't thinking about what they're going to do on their turn, and now they're figuring it all out during their turn. That's not cool. You don't want to do that either, and players can be just informed of that. The other thing I notice here is it says what square to move to, which means that they are using a grid rather than theater of the mind. Grids slow down the game because now everyone has to do more calculations, the DM and the players. Personally, I prefer theater of the mind, not only because it speeds up turns, but also because this is an improv role-playing game. Right? Let people's imagination run wild. Don't force them to snap it to a grid. That's my opinion. That said, I've had fun playing games where there was a grid, so that's up to you. Moving on to number 2. If you want harder fights, bring a second character sheet and expect to twiddle your thumbs when you die. I'm not going to baby anyone. Okay, bring a second character sheet. Yes, I strongly recommend that. And I do that too, in case your character dies, even if there's a resurrection mechanic in this game. It may not kick in right away. You don't want to be doing nothing while your characters are going to town or the temple or whatever to resurrect your character. Have a second character sheet so you can play a character while that's happening, a character that can be written into the story as soon as your previous character dies. As for whether there should be a resurrection mechanic, well, it depends on your DM. It depends on the type of campaign you're playing. Both answers to that question are fine depending on the situation. You do want fights to be hard enough that death is an option. If fights are too easy, well, then it's not fun. Moving on to number 3. If you call me or my roles unfair, I'll get up and go home, and if you got to ride with me, you can find your way back. Okay, I think it's more fun if the DM does their roles where possible so that everyone can see. Not only does that remove this question of was the role fair, but it's also just more fun that way, seeing what the role is going to turn out to be. It's exciting. Now, there are some roles that have to be done behind a screen. That makes sense. And for that, just trust your DM. The DM is not your opponent if you're a player. The DM is there to create puzzles that are solvable by you. The DM wants you to beat those encounters and solve those puzzles so that you can see the result and appreciate it and move through the story and all that. Trust your DM. Okay, number 4. I'm going to take characters' loot away as regularly as you want it given out. Okay, so this seems to apply to a situation where the characters have loot, which makes them overpowered and breaks parts of the game. So they shouldn't be able to obtain that loot in the first place. The DM controls what items are available in the game, and items that would break the game should not be allowed. If somehow an item like that slips in, maybe the DM didn't realize that it breaks the game, well then alter the game world so it doesn't break the game anymore. And if that means taking the item away, okay, but don't just make it a I take your item away because I want to and I'm the DM. Have that happen in the story. Maybe the item is stolen, or maybe someone offers an immense amount of gold to sell the item, or maybe the item needs to be destroyed to heal some NPCs. Something like that I think would work better than just taking it away. Worst case scenario, you can talk to the player one-on-one and say, hey, this item breaks the game. Is there some way we can agree that you lose it? In exchange, I give your character something else. But I think that's a last resort. Okay, number 5. If you don't act out any of your persuasion or intimidation or any other social checks, then you fail before you even roll. Okay, so I would disagree with this one. Is it more fun if people act out their charisma checks? Yes, it's more fun, but it shouldn't be mandatory. It's like with the other rules. If you're rolling a dexterity attack roll, you don't have to actually aim a dart at a dartboard, right? You have a high enough bonus, you roll. If you roll high enough, you roll high enough. That's it. There's other ways to encourage players to act out their charisma checks. For example, inspiration points. Right? You can hand out inspiration for good role playing, and then players could use those inspiration points to re-roll something or to gain advantage somewhere or get a bonus on a roll, that sort of thing. Number 6. If you don't pick up cues for side quests, that's not my problem. Get over yourself. It's not a video game. It's a pen and paper based game with miniatures. I'm not holding your hand. Okay, so cues for side quests don't have to be obvious. That's fine. If the players miss the cues for a side quest, then they miss it. At the same time, they should be obvious enough that it is within reason that the players will understand that cue. And that's up to the DM to make it obvious enough. And sometimes players will think that something's a cue for a side quest when it was not intended that way at all. And then the DM can improv a side quest on the spot, and then the results of that side quest can actually have an immense impact on the whole story, and that's awesome when that happens. Okay, number 7. If you move to a square in combat, there's no takebacks. Okay, immediately I think, why are you moving to a square? Why are you using a grid? Like I said before, I prefer theater of the mind over using a grid. That said, if you are using a grid, it looks like what this is referring to is players making a decision and then changing their mind after. Okay, and if you're changing your mind after seeing the consequences of the decision, no, that's cheating. You can't do that. Okay, players might say, oh, well, but I should have known the information that has to do with those consequences. And if I knew that information, I wouldn't have made that decision, and the information wasn't presented to me. Well, okay, maybe, but the fact is you didn't have that information. It wasn't presented to you. There's plenty of roles you can do, plenty of skill checks you can ask to do to get more information. Either you didn't do those roles or you didn't pass those roles. The consequences are on the table. The game goes on. Okay, number 8. If you tell every single person what you're doing before you do it, don't roll the dice and then say what you're doing. Of course. Okay, you have to say what you're rolling for before you roll. You can't roll, look at the result, and then say what you meant to do. That's cheating. Number 9. I will give out exhaustion more frequently. Sure, the DM can do that if they want to. If you argue, go home, or you can actually fight me over it, okay? Or you can DM yourself. Now, this is actually a good piece of advice. DM yourself. I recommend every single player also tries DMing at least once, because it'll get you to appreciate the game much more. You'll actually enjoy the game much more because you'll be able to see it both from the DM's perspective as well, and you'll understand what the DM has to do to make the game happen. It'll turn your game experience into a much fuller experience. I really strongly recommend it. Okay, number 10. If every snide comment you make to an NPC will be remembered and paid back. You seem to believe there is little consequence. Okay, yeah, that's fine. If snide comments made to NPCs upset those NPCs and then the NPC creates problems for the party, that's fine. Now, why do they believe there's no consequence? Probably because there haven't been a lot of consequences. Okay, now that's up to the DM to create those consequences, and then the party understands, oh, if we upset an NPC, that NPC creates problems for us. Okay, 11. You will not be given a mega dungeon every session. A temple is not the size of a small city, neither is a cave. This will happen when it's natural and organic. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Not every dungeon is going to be huge. 12. The travel portion is done. You want to travel continents, doing literally whatever you want. Go play World of Warcraft or play D&D with AI. Okay, so I'm actually fine with players traveling, trying to do whatever they want. There should be some mechanic that keeps them within the world of that story. For example, in the Curse of Strahd campaign, there's the fog, which keeps them within the valley, but that valley is huge and they can go wherever they want in that valley. What a DM could do is have a certain set of encounters that they just keep just in case the party goes somewhere where the DM hasn't created an encounter for. For example, you could have one encounter for every terrain type, and if the party just decides to travel in a random direction, you give them one of those stock encounters that are meant for that terrain type. Okay, 13. If you're late with no good reason, I'm going to have your character's hit points. This is connected to 14 if you don't show up for a good reason, and that'll be determined by me alone. Then the first time you're going to lose a whole level or 3 major items. The second time you'll be removed from the chat. Okay, so generally speaking, I think we should be forgiving for that sort of thing. Sometimes people are late. Sometimes they have to cancel. It happens. We don't know what the reason is. I don't think they need to tell us what the reason is. Things that happen in the real world shouldn't affect things in the game world, like having your character's hit points. It happens. We should be tolerant of it, and you don't actually need all the players there to run a session. Okay? The players who are not there, well, their characters can be considered to be hanging out at a tavern or sleeping while that particular session is going on. And the next session when they're there, they can be filled in on what happened. Okay, I once ran a, well, it wasn't really a campaign, it was a one-shot, but it took several sessions, where there were 5 players, and usually all of them would not be there. Sometimes only 2 would be there, and not always the same 2. And the story all took place during one night. They basically had to survive camping for a night in one location. And how we did it was that those players who are not there, well, their characters are sleeping during that session, and those players who are there, their characters are awake and interacting with the world around them. And it worked out great. Even one time, the characters who were awake decided to play a prank on their sleeping party members, and then next session, the characters who showed up had to deal with the consequences of that prank. It worked out pretty great. Okay, 15. If you're too stoned or drunk to play, I will go home without warning. Okay, this goes for any kind of social interaction. If you're too intoxicated that you're actually creating problems for others, that's not cool. Don't do that. 16. If you get up for a bong or smoke or whatever breaks in 10 minutes, I'll simply pack up and go home, sick of waiting for people. Okay, yeah, you're sitting down to play for like 3 hours. It makes sense. People are going to have to get up and do something in that time. They're not going to sit for 3 hours straight. It's good to time that so that everyone's going to do their thing at the same time. And that's pretty easy to do. Okay, 17. Guidance, divination spells, owls, and whatever spells I decide are too stupid are banned outright. No more guidance. Okay, you know, that's fine. The DM can ban whatever spells they want. They should communicate that to the players. You know, these spells are allowed, these spells are not. That's fine. Not every spell has to be existing in every single campaign. It is good to communicate that to the players early. Okay, so the player doesn't have a build which is based on some spell they get in level 6, and then they get to level 6 and they're told they can't do that spell, right? So better to communicate that early. Understandably, that might not always happen. Sometimes that spell is chosen and only after that the DM realizes, oh no, this breaks the game. Okay, ideally the DM can then alter the game world so that everything can still work with that spell existing, so they don't have to say to the player, oh hey, you're gonna have to pick a different spell now, okay, after they're used to using that spell. Worst case scenario, yeah, that's what the DM does, talks one-on-one to that player, hey, this spell breaks the game, how about you pick a different spell, and in exchange you get some item or something like that, or you create some story mechanism where maybe that spell is forgotten. Okay, moving on to 18. You get one chance at a skill check. If you F up, your party doesn't get their chance to do the same check. Think carefully who's good at what. Okay, sometimes I would disagree with this. Okay, it makes sense sometimes. Like something is flying by the party, someone says, I want to try to catch it. Okay, roll, you try to catch it, you fail. The thing flew by, someone else says, now I want to try to catch it. No, you can't. Right? It already flew by. You can't try to catch the thing that is no longer around you anymore. But what if someone tries to like push a heavy thing out of the way, rolls, fails, someone else says, now I want to try to push the heavy thing. Yeah, go ahead. The heavy thing is still there. Go ahead and push. Right? Now, also, the difficulty can change as each consecutive person tries it. Maybe you're trying to convince an NPC of something and the NPC is getting irritated. So each player that fails their check to, say, persuade the NPC to do something, well, then the difficulty goes up for the next player trying to persuade them. Or maybe it's the opposite. Each persuasion pushes the NPC to agree a little bit more, so the difficulty actually goes down for each consecutive player trying to persuade them. Okay, so there are situations where that could work. Here's the problem with this. Think carefully who's good at what. Sometimes one character has the highest bonus for most of the skills. And if you just pick the person with the highest bonus to do every roll, then that one player is going to be doing most of the stuff, and that's boring for the others. Okay, 19. Discussion of metagame details in game will result in instant damage to your character. Here's why that's funny. Okay, in discussion of metagame details in game, here it's implied that that's a bad thing to do because it's like metagaming. Okay, sure. Will result in instant damage to your character, but then that's the DM metagaming because he's taking something that happens that's not supposed to be part of the game world, but he makes it part of the game world as damage to the character. Here's my take on this. Discussion of metagame details in the game. Well, if the humans playing the game want to discuss the metagame details, go ahead and do that. But you can't use that information in the game. Your characters in the game can only use information available to them. Okay, now if someone does metagame, I don't think it should result in instant damage. They should just be told by the DM, well, that's metagaming. You can't do that. It's against the rules. Okay, 20. Rules lawyering fellow players is encouraged. Actuallying me will result in me telling you to F off. Okay, so yeah, don't correct the DM on what the rules are. They are the DM. They're running the game the way they believe the game should be run. They are also the referee. Rules lawyering in general, players doing it to each other or to the DM, that slows down the game, right? Instead of playing, you're just like flipping through rules and trying to figure stuff out. You can do that between sessions. Okay, and if someone does something against the rules during a session and people just go with that, okay, so be it. The DM isn't going to let something happen if it breaks the campaign anyways. Is it okay for a player to correct another player and saying, oh, hold on, you can't do that, that's against this rule, that rule? Well, it really depends on the dynamics between them, between those two people, if that's okay or not. I can't really give a blanket statement like that's always wrong or that's always not wrong. But in general, I'd suggest keeping the rules lawyering to a minimum. You're showing up to play, not to argue about the rules. It's not a competitive game. You're all working as a team. So even if something is done against the rules, if the DM lets you go with it, just go with it. Okay, 21. You roll your dice within view of other players. Okay, that makes sense. Failing to do these things will auto-fail the roll and so on. Okay, so this is talking about people cheating. Okay, roll your dice so other people can see how the dice roll, so they know you're not cheating. That makes sense. And that's that. Okay, 22. Instant death traps and mechanics are coming into place. If you call these things unfair moving forward, I'll laugh at you, and so on. I'm fine with instant death trap mechanics. Some DMs don't like it, some players don't like it. It really depends on the group and the kind of campaign that you're running, so I don't see anything wrong with that. Okay, I will not give you random magical items and vendors will not stock them. They're meant to be rare and hard to acquire. Yes, correct, they are rare, hard to acquire. If a vendor has them, they're not going to have the incredibly powerful ones and they're not going to have a lot of them. Random encounters in the form of random dragons or strange mysterious road traders or a band of goblin prostitutes, okay, isn't going to happen. Go play Baldur's Gate 3. I have played Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think that game has any random encounters. But in any case, random encounters are okay to have, and they're also okay to not have, and it's up to the DM to decide whether that makes sense in a campaign or not. And if you're playing, how do you even know if an encounter is random or not? You only know what happens. You don't know if the DM determined that randomly. Now, where random encounters make sense is, let's say the party is traveling and you don't want it to feel like teleportation. You throw in a random encounter so it actually feels like a journey to get to that spot. There can also be random encounters where the story has multiple branches and the randomness determines what direction the story is going to go in. Okay, 25. I don't give two Fs what Reddit said about X or Y. Connected to 26. I actually give less Fs about what your mate's group did. Correct. Okay, the DM of your campaign is the DM of your campaign. How they run it is differently how other DMs run it, differently from how other DMs run it, and that's okay. Just because someone ran things differently doesn't mean this game has to be like that. Enjoy the game your DM designed. 27. Saying anything to me about other players not liking me or doing X or Y without them saying it directly to me will result in me kicking you out of the group. Don't use someone else to push your agenda. So there could be two things going on here. It could be that someone is too shy to bring up something bothering them. Someone else is speaking up on their behalf. Okay, that's fine. Talk to the DM one-on-one. It can happen. It could also be that someone's lying. They have a problem. They want it to seem like a bigger problem, so they're saying other people have that problem too. Don't do that. It's not cool, and people can kind of sense when you're doing that as well. In general, if something's bothering you about the game, talk to the DM one-on-one. That's totally fine, and the DM is there for you to have fun, and you guys can negotiate how to make things work. 28. You're not to sit down and have a 2-hour discussion about what somebody from somewhere secondary did 3 weeks ago. Take the 15-20 minutes before the game to do that. Okay, so this has to do with people having a discussion about something that's not related to the game during the game. Now that can make sense for something like cards or dominoes. Dungeons and Dragons is a game where it's about immersion and role-playing, and there's an improv component to it. And if you start talking about something unrelated, it breaks the immersion. So it's better to keep that to a minimum. Yes, that kind of spontaneous conversation can come up once in a while. Inside jokes can come up. Someone can associate, oh, this thing that happened in the game is related to this other thing unrelated to the game. That's fine. Just try not to break immersion. Okay, 29. Saying stuff like, guys, come on, we're not here to have fun. This is D&D. This is serious. It's rude and dismissive. Okay, yeah, like, be nice to each other. Be nice to the DM. DM be nice to his players. Makes sense. Rule 30, don't order food randomly. We'll eat together at a specific time or not at all. I don't want food all over my things. No food or drink near my things. If you wreck something, you can pay for it. And then some details. Okay, so one thing, you're sitting down for 3 hours. People are going to want to eat. That's fine to have snacks and all that. At the same time, don't get other people's stuff dirty. If you damage something of someone else, you replace it. That's just common courtesy. That makes sense. 32. Arguments between party members outside of roleplay will be resolved by me giving the definite ruling. Okay, so arguments between party members outside of roleplay can actually be really entertaining and a big part of what makes the game fun, right? They're arguing about what should be the strategy on, whatever turn, or they're arguing about what the party should do next. That's fun, part of the game. They're enjoying it. Let it happen. If a ruling does need to be made, well then of course the DM is the one who has to make that ruling. Okay. 33. I don't give an F what they did in Critical Role or what some guy on Reddit said, and so on. And this is the key sentence here. The world I run works on internal rulings and lore I created specifically for it. Correct. Okay? Whatever the player thinks should be happening doesn't mean that that works here. Okay? The DM knows the culture of this world. The DM knows the motivations of all the NPCs, what's going on in the background. If something happens that seems to not make sense to a player, that's okay. Trust the DM. The DM has arranged the world to maximize you having fun. The DM knows that it's there. And mystery is a big part of D&D. Okay? If something doesn't make sense to you, that's part of the game's mystery. Try and solve the mystery in the game. Okay, 34. Every single... Oh, it got cut off. Every single person in this chat is having debuffs applied to their character. That should have occurred a long time ago. This will be specific to characters. Okay, this is dealing in with a situation where characters are too strong, they're overpowered, and it's breaking the campaign. I would suggest against debuffing characters. Okay, the players tried to make their characters powerful and succeeded, and they should get to enjoy that. What would be better is just making everything else in the game world more difficult so that it is no longer broken, despite the fact that some characters might have become overpowered. Okay, so make the world overpowered in that case. Worst case scenario, if you think there's no way to do that, okay, you can talk to a player one-on-one, say, hey, this particular trait of this particular character is overpowered. Is there something we can replace it with? Okay, 35. If you don't bring your sheet, this means character sheet, you don't play. The DM can just keep everybody's character sheet. Actually, in every game I've run where we weren't using an app for character sheets, players actually asked me to keep their character sheet, and that's fine. It's easier for one person to have to remember to bring stuff, which the DM has to do anyways, rather than a bunch of people having to remember. 36, if you don't bring dice, borrow some. Yeah, that of course makes sense, right? You're going to use someone else's if you don't have your own. Okay, when we play D&D, I'm not your friend. That doesn't mean you treat me like an enemy during the game. It means I'm no longer being nice. Okay, this just means that the DM is the referee, and he's not going to bend the rules for you just because you're their friend. Don't treat me like an enemy. A lot of players, they think that they're playing against the DM. That's false. The DM is not trying to get the players to lose. The DM is trying to get the players to win while also having fun doing it. The DM designed all of these encounters and puzzles to be beatable. They want you to beat it and see the result and see the campaign progress. Trust the DM. He's there to help you. Okay, and if you're creating problems for the DM, you're actually making it more difficult for the DM to create a fun experience for you. The DM is not your adversary. He's your partner in you having fun in this game. Okay, if you treat me poorly in any way, shape, or form, before or during the game due to something that happened in the game, you're out. If you can't separate the game from reality, then you're some bad name calling. Okay. Yeah, the game world is not the real world. Bad things can happen to your character in the game. That's like watching a movie and the character you're cheering for has something bad happen to them. That's just part of the game. And a more difficult situation actually can be more fun to deal with in this kind of storytelling game. Okay, 39, you will submit your spell list daily. If you do not give me a spell list in each game day, you will not be allowed to cast a single spell or cantrip in combat. I don't trust you guys to not use this against me. And that's related to 40. If you do not mark off spell slots, or you say something like, I remember what I'm at, as a way to justify it, I'll simply fail your spell, deal half your health and damage to you, and so you have no spells to cast for the rest of the day. Okay, so both of these have to do with cheating using spells, which is actually a very easy way to cheat, okay? Because if you're a spellcasting character, there's a lot to keep track of. What spells do you have prepared? What spells are in your spell book? What spells could you even prepare? How many spell slots do you have of what? Yes, it's a lot to keep track of. The DM already has a lot to keep track of. It's difficult for them to keep track of that for you. And so spellcasting characters can cheat and say they have a spell prepared when they don't. They can say they learned a spell when they didn't. They can act like they have spell slots that they don't actually have. Very difficult for the DM to keep track of that. As a DM, I wouldn't even want to keep track of that. I'd rather just trust the players. Players, don't cheat on this, okay? Yeah, it's easy to do it. Don't do it. You're actually going to have more fun if you don't do it. It's more fun to be stuck in a situation where, oh, you wish you had access to that spell that you don't have access to. Now you have to think of a creative way to get out of that situation. That's more fun. Don't cheat. Let yourself have fun with a more challenging game. Okay, 41, if you break literally anything, you can buy the replacement. I think we discussed that before. 42, if you complain about the choice of music, I fully expect you to bring the whole playlist. Well, so sometimes the DM will pick a specific piece of music that matches a specific scene, in which case just go with it. They picked it. Otherwise, if the DM says you can pick the music, okay, sure, you can pick the music. 43, cannot stress enough how little I care how you feel about my rulings from now on. Okay, yeah, trust the DM. Don't argue with the DM. At the same time, the DM should care what players think because the DM's job is for the players to have fun. Rule 44, I'm never just threatening you, I'm promising you. I'm not sure if that's referring to all these rules and just saying that, and by the way, I mean it. Or is that referring to the NPCs getting upset and threatening characters and that characters should watch out for that? In any case, I think it's interesting how this set of rules spawned all these discussions about sportsmanship, about game design, and I hope that was entertaining for everyone and valuable. So until next time, enjoy.